And happy Sunday, everyone, and welcome to another episode of JMU Sound Off. Spring is officially here, which means it's a season of new life, and that term actually applies to JMU football in about as positive a way as you could possibly imagine. As not only do we have a new coaching staff, but dozens and dozens of new players on the roster, and today we are honored to have Coach Billy Napier as part of the program. We're going to discuss everything that has happened over the last couple of months and look forward to the start of spring ball. So we're excited to get to that conversation, but first, we want, as always, thank our sponsors, Skyline Financial Partners. They can help your family plan for lasting financial success. You can learn more by visiting SkylineFinancialPartners.com. Champions Drive Bourbon. Remember that every bottle of Champions Drive that is purchased goes to support student athletes on campus at JMU and our pursuit of championships. You can find a bottle near you at an ABC store at abc.virginia.gov. Where's Woody? Remember that you can get 25% off the entire Where's Woody site, perfect for spring and summer, by entering promo code SOUNDOFF25 for 48 hours after every episode. And again, that is at where'swoody.com. Shout out to Shoker and Associates, as well as the Dead Meat Society. You can join the movement for grilling enthusiasts at deadmeatsociety.com. Now is a perfect time to reach out to our friends at Outdoor Kitchen Creations. You're planning your backyard patio. Backyard grilling season is upon us. You can learn more at backyardtrends.com. And can't think of a better place to enjoy a beautiful spring and summer day than at Valley Road Vineyards. Next time you're on I-64, go check out our friends there, and you can learn more at valleyroadwines.com. But with that, we're going to get right to the man of the hour, Coach Billy Napier, joining us as a part of his Sunday. Coach Napier, thanks for spending some time with us. I was reflecting a little bit before today's episode on what the last 6 months has been like from you, the transition from Florida, going around, doing the interview process, then coming to Harrisonburg, and everything that comes with this new era of college football and building a roster. Have you had a chance to just pause and take a couple of deep breaths in the last few months?
Well, I'm going to tell you, the first month was intense. You know, we ended up hiring 36 people, and I think we signed 62 football players in a short window of time. But I'm going to tell you, I think the administration here did an incredible job. When you start thinking about the Sun Belt Conference Championship, the college football playoff, hiring a new staff and new coach, can't compliment the leadership here at JMU enough. But it's been an incredible experience. And for me, I would say third time being a head coach, you know, typically you're getting the job because there's issues within the program. And this has been awesome to inherit positive situation, a lot of momentum, incredible player-led culture, and an administration that always seems to be one step ahead.
Awesome. Afton.
First of all, Coach, I want to say thank you for joining us. I know you're a busy man, first year on the job, but you're back in the Sun Belt. Everyone knows you're at Louisiana and Florida. So what are you excited to do the same or maybe even differently from your last Sun Belt stop?
Well, I think the big picture wise, you're trying to continue to elevate the program, right? And obviously, you know, reality is we're competing for one of 70 with 70 teams for one college football playoff spot. Now that starts with an incredible all-season program, you know, one game at a time, an Eastern Division Championship, a Sun Belt Conference Championship, and then trying to put the team in position to be that team that can earn that spot in the CFP. So, but you know, as coaches, we like to live in kind of short windows of time. We're getting ready to start spring practice here Saturday, actually, and we've executed our first phase and second phase really well. But this place is capable of growth, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here.
Yeah, so we all know in this new era, we're going to have a lot of new players every year, and obviously first year for you. So we have, I think you said 50 new players. But for the players that did stick around, like Braden Wisloski, Jaden Mines, KJ Flo, George Petaway, and shout out Braden Wisloski. I've gotten pretty close with him recently. He wanted a shout out, so shout out Wiz. But for those players that did stay, do you need them to be a vocal leader saying, we were here last year, we made the playoffs, we won a Sun Belt championship?
Yeah, it's been one of the best parts of the experience so far is meeting individually with each one of those 50 guys that were coming back. And look, I really, You know, we've been talking about Duke's DNA, right? What is in the DNA of the program? Really 20 years of significant success, always a contender, always in the mix for a championship. And those players, the way they talk about the place, the people, there's a pride and a passion here that's second to none. And they've done a great job of speaking up and carrying that message, the lessons that they were taught. I mean, you think about Jaden Mines. Boog has played for 2 years for Coach Sig, 2 years for Coach Chesney, and then now he's playing his 5th year of college football at James Madison, going to get his degree. But those guys have great perspective about the place, what works here, the lessons that they've learned from those veteran players. And now they're the veteran, and it's their job to teach the rookie the expectation and the standard here for sure.
So through the portal, everyone could kind of see a theme of size and athleticism, it felt like. But particularly in the quarterback room, when you look at your past years, it does seem like you like a dual threat quarterback, a bigger quarterback. Is that the same case here? Because I saw you brought in Arrington Maiden, Davi, is that how you pronounce it? Davi, right? Mm-hmm. And then you still have J.C. Evans and Camden Coleman. Those are big bodies. They're all capable of running, 3 of them very capable of running. Is that your sort of style, or is it just kind of line up that way?
Yeah, I think you need a player that can make some plays with his feet. You know, we talk about the ability to escape, to extend the play. And in a perfect world, you can get into the design run world with the quarterback. You know, I think you create an extra gap and certainly can create a nightmare for the defensive guys if the guy can make some plays with his legs. So we've had success. Certainly, Levi Lewis was our quarterback at Louisiana those 4 years. He was very capable of making plays with his feet, and the guys that we had at Florida were in the same category. So it's going to be one heck of a competition, and they're all athletes, and they all have character. They have great leadership traits, and it's been fun to watch that group work so far.
So we're going to bring on Michael and Taylor. They're going to ask you a couple questions, Coach. Taylor, if you want to kick it off.
Sure. Coach Napier, thank you again for coming on and taking your Sunday to speak with us. I just wanted to kind of ask, we had Dave Riggert on a couple of episodes ago, and he told a story about, I guess, when your ops director, Jacob LaFrance, came to JMU and got here, he gave you a call and said, Coach, you're not going to believe this doesn't look or feel like a Sunbelt school. Can you kind of go into, like, you know, his reaction there and what I assume might be the reaction of some of the other members of your staff that weren't as familiar with JMU and some of those first impressions upon arriving on campus in Harrisonburg?
Yeah, I think the big thing for me was I was just impressed with the infrastructure that has been built here. You know, and I just think the administration has been very calculated about how they've moved, not only as they've moved up in level of competition, but also what they've built here and the capability of continuing to grow. You know, I think the campus kind of speaks to that, right? You talk about the East Campus, the ISAT, that was a very intentional move to continue the elevation of the university, to put it in position for future accomplishments. And athletics has been a part of that as well, right? So I can't compliment the administration enough just in terms of how they moved. I think the campus is speaks to the history and the tradition of the place. The week that I came here was the week of the conference championship game. And I was able to walk the campus and drive downtown and grab lunch and feel the energy. You know, I think a lot of the classes are in person here. So the students are out and about. They're walking to class. There's an energy that comes with this place that makes it very special. So to me, the stadium being right in the heart of campus and the growth potential. I mean, you're not landlocked. There's room for this place to continue to grow and advance. And I know there's aspiration to do that. So I had been talking to so many coaches that had coached here, players that had played here, staffs that had come here as the visiting team. And I'm hearing that. And then I get off that Zoom with President Jim, and I'm like, hey, I tell my wife, like, I've got to get on a plane and go see this with my own two eyes. So it didn't disappoint. And I had conviction about it that day. So you guys know it, but this is a hidden gem here, man. It's a special place. The more people that I meet, the more things I learn about the place, the more impressed I am.
Coach, thanks again for taking your Sunday with us. It's exciting to get to talk to you and kind of getting a feel for you and the program as we get into the spring ball. As we think about culture, right? We look at JMU, you mentioned the campus, how buzzing the campus is. And I think we just saw a couple of days ago, we had over 40,000 applicants for students again for the second year in a row. So James Madison just continues to grow. Let's talk on the field a little bit, or in the locker room. Like over the last few years, Coach, there's been a lot of emphasis around culture and team. So you mentioned 62 new additions. What are some of the creative ways that you've built culture over the last few weeks and the sense of team in the winter going into spring ball?
Well, we took an interesting approach. I think in the off-season program in phase one, during the lift groups, we did what we called 2-minute drills. So mid-run, mid-lift, we would have, guys get in groups of 4, and then we would have a specific assignment where each player, they would learn a little bit about each other. And then at the end of the run or at the end of the lift, Coach Locke would call one of the guys up to speak about his group and kind of tell the story of each of the players in their group. And then we really relied on some of the veteran players. We started giving them a platform at the end of these lifts and runs to talk about what JMU means to them, right? What it has, the impact that it has made on them as people, as students, as football players. Because I do think that that's what makes the place tick, is the player-led culture that has been here. I had one guy say, it doesn't matter who's in that office up there. We're going to play football a certain way, right? So it has been incredible to see these guys come together. Our staff has talked about that. We call it KYT, know your teammate. We require every player on the team to know first, last name, hometown and state, and then obviously position, jersey number. We did a ton of compete periods at the end of our off-season workouts where they would compete against each other in different formats. We also have what we call Journey 101 groups, which is 14 groups of players, 7 or 8 players per group, and then each of the coaches leads the group. And we've done occasional meals with those groups. We have some curriculum that they go through with each other. And then also they did a service-oriented event in the community just a couple weeks ago. So, it all matters, but, getting to a point where there's a connection there. There's I know the story. I can push the buttons. I think that's ultimately what's great about the game of football, and certainly building a football team is one of the funnest things there is to do out there for sure.
Awesome. Let's lead into that a little bit, because you mentioned 36 hirings right over the last 2 or 3 months, and you look at the banners, the championship trophies. I think Taylor, you could check me. I think we haven't had a losing season since 2002. What's the perception of that, right? Like, I think there's obviously a massive bar here, expectation, whether FCS, FBS. How do you and the coaching staff take that challenge and make sure that your team understands the urgency and expectation that's been built here?
Well, it's hard to ignore just living here. There's an energy. I mean, I think I have conversations with the players all the time. There's an obligation here amongst the players. I would tell you that, in my conversations with these veteran players, the community matters here. You know, I think that we talk about being the Valley's team. I do think that that's a real thing, and the players feel a sense of obligation that they represent this community. You know, they do represent kind of a blue collar. This community is unique, right? You're talking about farmers, mill workers. There's a refugee resettlement here that's a unique diversity, the university community. And then you got 23,000 students that love athletics. And I think it's part of the culture here. The players feel an obligation that they represent the community. And we talked a lot about that, you know, and I think it's important. The 50 guys that are returning, the urgency that they know is coming, that's got to rub off on these rookies that just showed up. So, and I would say we benefited from retaining a couple key people. Dallas Jackson has done a great job with the player development, the impact program. I think Dave Plungus and Kyle Barnes have been huge. Their experience having been here the last couple of years. So Brian Shore coming back as a former player is a huge deal, right? So I think continuity, although it's small, I think that those things have contributed. And, you know, this is different, right? You're inheriting positive momentum, you know, a place that has expectations. There's healthy culture. So for me, I'm asking a lot of questions. I'm talking to coaches that were here with Coach Signetti, with Coach Houston. I actually talked to Mickey Matthews the other day. And then Coach Chesney and I have had the chance to meet quite a bit and text back. So he's been a great sounding board as well.
I like that you brought up the Valley's team, because I feel like a lot of people in our fan base have kind of felt that for a long time, but it's only recently to where the university's kind of embraced that tagline. And, you know, what's unique about where JMU is situated is there's a defined geographic boundary. You have the Blue Ridge to one side, you have the Allegheny to the other, and we are the only FBS program, you know, in that corridor between Richmond going all the way down to, you know, where I'm in the Roanoke area where the Shenandoah Valley starts. So it kind of allows us to kind of carve out a place that is our own. And I kind of wanted to go into that a little bit more because I'm always interested in the perspective outside of JMU. The JMU fan base, you know, we live in this purple bubble, and I think I've seen it in our fan base where there was even some frustration earlier this year when a lot of the media was talking about, you know, where did this JMU team come from? Well, if you're a JMU fan for the last 2 decades, as Michael mentioned, we know this has been a solid program, but the world is just now kind of getting used to this JMU program. So I wanted to ask you this. I'll set it up with, you said you came on campus in your interview process around the time of the conference championship. So you, like many other JMU fans, were on the edge of your seat. Are they going to win the championship game? Now that they've won it, what happens in this UVA Duke game? Oh my gosh, you know, they might have a shot. Then the announcement of the CFP announcement in Oregon. So you were kind of living that as a lot of JMU fans were. So I'm curious how in your coaches circles and in these players that you're recruiting that don't have a JMU background, how did you see their perceptions continue to either change or maintain of that JMU brand and what it means to the college football landscape?
As I'm telling you, you're basically describing all the things that I went through. Look, reality is James Madison was an FCS program 5 years ago. And, you know, when I was trying to decide if I was going to jump right back in and be a head coach again, am I going to go work for some of these guys that are good friends of mine at the highest level, the other G6 jobs that were open, right? So as I called around the country to talk to a lot of my friends that were in Group of Six football that had experience, current experience, because the game is completely different than it was maybe 5 years ago. As we talked about Tulane, Memphis, North Texas, and then James Madison, there was always a little bit of like, oh man, James Madison, that's the spot, right? And I think that the big thing here is there's a national reputation here of the administration, the alignment that is here, right? And the capability. People know what this place is capable of. So for me, it's interesting. Then you take the job, you watch kind of the dominoes start falling, right? You win the conference championship. Duke pulls it off. What an incredible finish to that game. Okay, then here we go. I can still remember it. We rush out of church. My boys are just as fired up as I am. All right, it's 12:07, 12:22. The show starts. We're running in the house, get the remote, turn the TV on, we get set up. Okay, and then when they pick Miami, okay, I'm looking at my 11-year-old son, and my son's like, "This is gonna happen," So, and then when that purple and gold logo popped up on that screen, like we're running around the house going nuts because we know what that means to the institution. We know what that means to an alumni network that's growing, that has incredible potential. If you dig into the history of this place, going all the way back to the early 70s and, starting football. And I just think that it made the job, what an incredible opportunity, And then I get here and I started observing, what was here, and realizing that there is a ton of room this place has an unbelievable ceiling. Is way up there. I've coached at some great places in college football, and that's what's exciting to me about this place is what it's capable of. So I can't emphasize enough, the fan base has a chip on their shoulder, okay? But let me tell you something. Every one of these players in our locker room, that's the purest form of football that I've come across in my entire career. Every kid we have, they came here because they want to win. They came here because they wanted to be at a place where football is really important. They care about academics. They care about their education. They know that this place is going to push them as a student, challenge them as a student, and they have an edge about them. Every one of them is out to prove themselves, whether they're coming here as a high school player or they're moving up in the portal, and the blueprint has worked. So it's pretty special to be a part of.
Yeah. Well, one more question about impressions before I kick it back to Michael. I did have to ask, were you following JMU's 2004 1AA National Championship? Because I have to bring this up as a former Furman Paladin. You were only 2 years removed. And I'll be honest, I was a sophomore in college. I was still getting used to the 1AA landscape. And I remember when we beat Lehigh, I just remember the talk going into that Furman game was Furman is one of those 1AA powerhouses, that this would be a tough game on the road. And I probably, again, I was a sophomore in college, so I hadn't drank 2 decades of purple Kool-Aid yet where I thought we could win every game. And I'll be honest, I was thinking it's just going to be tough to beat this Furman team. So I'm curious if you were following that game and if you followed that run back in 2004.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to watch those guys kind of get it going again. I think that Ingle Martin, was the quarterback, if I'm not mistaken. So he was breaking all my records. So I couldn't help but keep up with the program. So
and I should clarify for those that don't know what I'm talking about, that you did play. You were the quarterback at Furman from 1999 to 2002. Is that correct?
I was. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, Michael, go ahead.
Awesome. Well, I was going to say Taylor does a great job, not just giving all of us, including our listeners, a history lesson, but great job in terms of like shaping sort of how the college football impact and the culture and everything like that. Let's hop on the field a little bit, Coach, because I think that's what we're really excited about. So we know spring games, April 25th. I think practice starts, today, correct? Or at least this week. So you're going to see your team, right, together for essentially the first time on the field. So let's hop in a little bit. Like, let's start high level. What were your top priorities going into camp as you think about winter conditioning, and how do you feel about how you and your staff did against those benchmarks so far?
Well, I think the first thing is, phase one for us is really strength and conditioning only. And I think hiring Sean Lockwood from the University of Michigan was huge. He's been their number 2 guy there for the past 8 years, and we know the reputation of that strength and conditioning program and how it's contributed to their success. So his leadership has been impressive to watch, and he's got a great group of guys down there with different backgrounds that make up a great team. I do think that we talked specifically about establishing trust and communication. Those are the 2 main points of emphasis, right? Because a lot of new faces, player to player, player to coach, coach to player, whatever the case may be. And we had to get to a position where we could trust each other. And there had to be high-level communication to get to that point. So a lot of people learning a new place. As we mentioned earlier in the program, just the intentionality about learning the story of each player, each coach, creating environments where that could take place. I do think we established a really good baseline. The snow obviously presented some pretty cool experiences for the players. And it wasn't easy, right? And I think that's one of the things that makes this place what it is embracing kind of the toughness that comes with the place. But I do think we transitioned. We worked really hard in the portal from a recruiting standpoint while Sean was working with the team downstairs. And then when we got back from February break, we started phase 2. We actually started teaching football to the players and implementing systems. I think ultimately that's probably what's going to decide how far we go is, what type of connection can we build? And then what's the comprehension level of these systems, offense, defense, special teams. I think in year 1, you got to do a little bit more football because you're installing new systems. So we've done that. We're probably a little bit ahead of schedule, in my opinion. And then I'm excited. We get to put gear on, right? We get to put helmet pads on and kind of see where we're at. So huge emphasis on connection and then learning these systems so we can go play fast and play with confidence.
We talk a lot here about, when you think about the portal, the portal and bringing all these players in, and you mentioned the formula earlier. We talk about like production over potential. And I think you and your staff just on paper have done a great job, particularly on like wide receiver, bringing in some really solid potential there, or production. You look at the offensive line, particularly defensive line as well. You could tell, right, where you were prioritizing in the offseason. We haven't strapped the pads on yet, but which position groups do you think have impressed so far? And like which groups do you think made the biggest jump going into spring?
Well, I think first of all, let's go back to that process. I want to give credit to Jacob LaFrance. Jacob is our associate AD for player personnel. He's been with me. This is his 8th year with myself and our staff. I've watched thousands of players with the guy. We went heavy personnel in terms of how we set up the organization. We felt strongly that this is going to be an evaluation job, and we had to have the engine built to do that in a timely manner. So 7 people working around the clock. As we hired one, the engine got better and better, but they did a great job of getting out in front of that process. The people we inherited at different levels of football, I think that helped us. But yeah, I think there's 62 total new players. Lot of rebuilding to do in terms of the production, from James Madison's team last year. So to me, we did a good job on the line of scrimmage. I like the groups that we have on the D-line, the edge group. I like the offensive line group. I think we've got height, length. I think we have some players that have played a lot and some that I think are unique in their abilities. Look, I think there's going to be a lot of top conversation about the receiver group. to me, that group's impressed me. Look, time will tell, but I think in general here, the key to the drill was the ability to watch the team practice for 10 days leading up to the CFP. If we weren't able to do that, I don't think we could have done as good of a job in the portal or transitioning into the culture. I mean, I can't speak enough about that. That was the biggest blessing of all, was the way that Coach Chesney and the administration, the way we set that up and created a rhythm to that time of the year where we could watch practice, we could have conversations with the coaches about the roster, who's leaving, who's staying, their opinions about the players. And then the personnel department's job was to go find them, and they did. And I think we had 64 official visits in 19 days. And that hit rate was way up there. I mean, I don't know exactly what it was, but, Cliff Wood, Stephen Laporta, their involvement in that process was huge. Marissa Manco, she did an incredible job helping with all the hiring process and the negotiations and HR processes that come with that. So, in general, man, I can't compliment the administration and the prior staff, the coaches that were here before, and their willingness to communicate with us and help us through that process. I think it was huge.
That's awesome. And I think you've indexed a lot to personnel, right? Which I think is good to hear. One of our former coaches, Mickey Matthews, always said it's not the X's and O's. It's about the Jimmies and the Joes, right, on the field. And do you have good players or not, right, with those matchups? But I do want to get into X's and O's a little bit here. So you talked a little bit about wide receivers. I know our OC Cam Aiken came from East Tennessee State, brought in some weapons from his prior program. And then obviously you bring in the defensive coordinator, Robert Balla, who had some time at Alabama as well. Like what should fans expect maybe schematically that are either similar or different from last year's group, or maybe groups in years past, even before Coach Chesney?
Yeah, so, our defensive blueprint goes back all the way to the Ron Roberts days, Dave Aranda, Pete Golding, Patrick Toney, Carl Scott, Austin Armstrong, and now Robert Balla is kind of the next guy in that tree of coaches, and he's a great one. He had time with Coach Saban at Alabama. He worked in the Belichick tree at Washington, and then he spent a year with Coach Roberts last year at Florida. So, and you pair that with a couple different guys that have coordinated from the past. KB and Plungus being here. The pressure-oriented approach from last year. I think that's going to be interesting how we kind of mix some of that into what we do. And then offensively, Cam Aiken is a savant, man. He's a brilliant mind. He loves football. It only took a couple conversations with him to know that he could be trusted with not only the schematic part. I've been impressed with his leadership, of the staff, of the players. And he's got great experience at Clemson and at Ole Miss, at South Florida. And Rob Winger leading up the special teams. You get a guy who has, I think 7 years of Big Ten experience at Minnesota. I've had some great special teams coordinators as a head coach. And all those guys, when I called and asked Joe Houston and Matt Pallage and Chris Couch, Robbie Disher, all these guys that have worked for me in the past, that was the first name out of their mouth. Knowing how I operate, the emphasis on the kicking game, and Rob has been incredible so far. He's got great rapport with the players. He's got a really good system. He's a great teacher. So, for me, this is different. I'm able to be a little bit first time as a head coach, not running the offense. So for me, it's been pretty cool to kind of be able to, look at all parts of the organization really in depth And I think we've got good leadership in every area so far.
I think as fans, we're really excited to see what Cam Aiken can do. If you look at his stats at East Tennessee State, he was a very balanced offense. Brought in some pretty good talent there from the FBS level as well. I did want to do a quick follow-up on Robert Balla, because you mentioned he comes from the Bill Belichick background. And for our listeners, I imagine that's probably more odd front, three-man front, four linebackers, edge players, etc. How do you think JMU is in a unique position in terms of recruiting for that? You mentioned you like what we have at the edges, sort of that tweener, outside linebacker, defensive end position. Do you think we're in a place of advantage using that scheme?
Well, I think, you go put your team together literally 1 year at a time these days, and then you take the players that you have, and then you try to say, okay, hey, what best suits this group of players? Where are our strengths? I think the unique thing about our defensive system is the flexibility, not only year to year, but week to week, right? Who do we need to take away? What runs are we defending? What unique players are we defending? And we have the ability to match up, and play all types of offense. So I do think that we try to recruit to a system, but then we don't ignore what we have year to year, right? So we have position descriptions for each position on our defense. We try to kind of live within those parameters when we're evaluating and recruiting. And then obviously once the players are here and you start that process, then you got to build the scheme around the strengths of the players. So every week is about matchups. And I think that ultimately you're trying to take away what they do well, whether that's scheme or individual players, right? So I think we have the flexibility to do both of those things.
Well, Coach, I know a lot of fans, we're in the middle of season ticket sales. Last few years we've sold out on season tickets. A lot of fans are looking forward to the new schedule, which has just recently come out. We have our Sun Belt schedule in place. There were some changes to our out-of-conference schedule. I think one thing that fans are talking a little bit about is the late season bye. So I guess kind of three questions, all kind of related to the schedule. One, just your overall impressions of the schedule. Two, how do you approach that late season bye? And I guess the follow-up would be also, how do you prep for these schedules in this era where teams are having so much turnover that I would imagine in years past you might say, well, we have game film from them last year, but right now it's almost like every team is a new team. So just overall thoughts on the schedule, the bye, and preparation.
Well, it's interesting. I think that obviously with VTech kind of bowing out, I think that the San Diego State, that's a big game, and it's on the road. It's east to west travel. They've got a lot of production returning, and I think they're picked. A lot of people are picking them to win that conference, so that's going to be a tremendous challenge. I do think going and playing UConn late in the season as well, non-conference, that's going to present some challenges. Obviously, a new coach there, and Coach Candle, who's one of the better football coaches in the country. And then obviously opening up with Liberty at home, obviously an opponent that's inside of our state, and obviously some history there. So I do think that, the conference schedule, we knew the two Western Division teams. We do play some of these teams on the road, some of the better, what are considered some of the more returning production and what people anticipate being some of the better teams. Couple obviously App State and Marshall, those staffs are going into year two. 3 Thursday night games late in the year, obviously intentional there by the conference and by ESPN to get the Dukes in the spotlight. So, look, it is what it is at this point. I do think that we will, a lot of those short weeks, we typically do a lot of that planning ahead of time. And we also do extensive scouting reports on each team that we play, personnel and scheme, right? So we're going to make cut-ups of those players at the other institutions. We're going to do a deep dive on the schematics of the coordinators that are returning, whether that's at the current school or the school that they were at before. We assign a person on the staff, each team on each side of the ball, each phase, and they're kind of the expert on that team. So we'll present to the entire staff later in the calendar. And then the coordinators, one of the cool things that we do is that we built the staff to where the coordinators don't go on the road recruiting. So this spring, when the staff is on the road, myself and the coordinators will be working on some opponent work there and kind of taking a deep dive into the teams that we're going to play. So we built the staff that way to try to address some of the issues that you're bringing up there, because I do think that's a key piece to the puzzle.
Coach, last two questions here, and we'll carry on. So I appreciate you taking your Sunday with us. Regarding the schedule, right? You mentioned traveling to San Diego State, and then what people don't realize, or maybe they have, is then you've got an away game versus ODU, which is right down the road in Norfolk. But it's going to be a lot of energy behind that game, right? A lot of emotion. It's a state game. Each side knows each other. A lot of the players probably played with each other in high school as well. So looking into this, right? What identity do you want this team to have early in the season?
Well, look, I think that's the cool thing about building a football team is that, that identity is always evolving. I mean, we're 2 months into working with this group of players. And I can only speak to what I've seen so far. I think that we have to kind of maintain that underdog mentality. We got to be on the hunt, although we might be the hunted at this point, given the success that the program had and being kind of the reigning conference champ. We got to continue to attack and be aggressive, kind of bring that chip on the shoulder to work every day and maintain that edge. So this place has always been about, having something to prove. I think that we've got a hungry group of players, some of which are going to have the biggest role on the team that they've ever had in their career. So the focus right now is on ourselves, our current team, learning our systems, continue to make progress in terms of how we build connection with this group. But we've got a formula, and we're going to continue to teach that to the players. We're also going to try to give a lot of these guys that were here last year and years in the past a platform to speak up about what the standard is here. And we got to continue to elevate the program. We're not in the maintenance world. We're not maintaining the program. We're going to try to continue to elevate the program. There's a lot to accomplish, and I think we've got a group that's capable of doing that.
I love that you said that because, I think of, one of my mentors, right? He always talks about you never stay the same, right? You're either getting better or you're getting worse. So one last question here before I turn it back over to John, kind of a fun one. And maybe you've already answered this a little bit, but if you were talking to maybe a new JMU fan or someone maybe considering season tickets for the fall, what would you tell them to expect or maybe be excited about, JMU football going into this season?
Look, I think we've done a great job acquiring talent. I mean, I've been impressed. I mean, we got some really unique players to go along with the group that's coming back. We got some really good veteran leadership. But we've got a group of high character, talented group that's hungry to play. They're hungry to prove themselves. So, look, at James Madison, one of the previous coaches that coached here told me this, and it always stuck with me. Our number one resource is game day, right? Everything, in terms of recruitment, retention, game day is our number one resource, and the environment that we create here on game day is the best game day atmosphere in all group of six football. And that's what makes us different. It's the pride and the passion that our fans have and our student body has about this place and what it has to prove. And I think that we make ourselves different with the atmosphere that we create on game day. And I can promise you, based off the energy that I've been watching, amongst our staff and players, we're going to bring the energy, and I know our fans are going to bring the energy as well. So this is, we have momentum, and we need to use the momentum we have to continue to elevate the program and do historical things going forward. So it's a critical time, in my opinion, not only for the athletic department, the football program, but also for the institution as a whole, the alumni network as a whole. This place is on the verge of, exploding, in my opinion, and we got to take advantage of the momentum that we have.
Coach, I want to ask you one question about the Sun Belt Conference, just to joke, because you've had one experience going through this conference now at your time at Louisiana. Has anything changed about this conference since you were there before, now that you're doing your prep for next season? Or is kind of the DNA of this conference what it was when you were here before?
Well, the biggest change is the turnover in the personnel year to year. I think the portal and rev share, I think rev share is more specific to this league than NIL. Third-party NIL is probably the biggest issue at the next level of football, but rev share and the transfer portal, and who's willing to embrace that and have a strategy around that to retain their players, and also the strategy around who they bring into their program and how they build a team each year. That's the biggest difference. When I look at the numbers of, turnover and attrition on each one of these rosters in this conference, these numbers are in the 35 to 70 range. Whereas when I was at Louisiana, it's one of the reasons why I left Louisiana. I chose to stay there after year 2, year 3. And then we anticipated Austin money, NIL, portal. Our players were being tampered with. I mean, it was headed that you could see where we were headed. I enjoyed that level of football. It's the most fun I've ever had coaching football, the purity of the game. So I just think the roster turnover, and look, we had some players that left James Madison that generational, life-changing type of money. They didn't leave just because.
Yeah.
They left because they had an opportunity to really change the game in terms of the finances that were associated with that. So we have to continue to retain the reasonable situations on our team. We need to be competitive to retain those players. And then we have to come to grips with the fact that on occasion, we're going to have a guy that's just so good that, it makes sense for him to move up. We can't get frustrated with that.
And Coach, I want to ask you, because one of the things that I really appreciated in my day job, I work for the American Red Cross, and I got to see firsthand last year how dedicated the previous staff was to community service. And it's something that you have continued now that you're at JMU working with the Duke's Lead program. Speak to why that is such a priority, especially as you continue to build that bridge to the greater Harrisonburg community and really leading with that mantra of community matters.
Well, the number one reason that I'm a firm believer in that, we did 1 day a month for every player on our team at the University of Florida. And I thought it was a game changer. Ultimately, what I'm hoping happens is that the player is exposed to a situation where he's helping others, he's serving others, he's seeing situations where others may be less fortunate than him, and they come back. We've all experienced that in life, right? You wake up, you go do a day of service, community service, a nonprofit, a charity. You're going there patting yourself on the back, but reality is when the work is done and you experience what you experienced, you're coming back. That impacted you and your perspective more than you helped them. And I think we want that for our players. We're trying to create gratitude. We're trying to create awareness of the value of education. And we want them to realize that they have a platform, and that logo never comes off. They're always representing this place. In recruiting, we talk about start here, finish here, come back here. And I do think that being connected to that community is a part of that experience. It's a part of college athletics that I think that we want to emphasize, and it can make a difference in the kid's, what he does going forward. Sometimes athletics, sport can be the difference in a guy's life, and sometimes that community service piece is ultimately something that they can look back upon that made a huge difference in who they are.
Yeah, it's awesome stuff. And again, I've seen your players out doing everything from smoke alarm installations to working with local youth groups. And it's amazing to see. And again, it's going to continue to further that ability to call ourselves the Valley's team. I wanted to go some family questions real quick. Football wives have always been special. They've been a unique breed. But in this new era of college football, the demands on family are even more intense. I want to give you a chance to brag on the other member of your family household and why she is such an important part of your ability to do this job, but to also for her to help keep you grounded and make sure you're taking some deep breaths occasionally.
Yeah. Anybody that knows my wife knows she's going to keep me grounded for sure. I joke around that my wife is like a Marvel character, right? She's got like these superpowers that, and you don't know until you're in the middle of that. I think there's just an incredible amount of respect for the selflessness, the independence, the leadership, right? I mean, I think there's certain times of the year where I spend more time on my staff and the players than I do with my wife and my kids, right? So her understanding of the purpose behind coaching, why we do what we do, she obviously has an opportunity to get to know these guys. And one of the things that we try to encourage our staff to do is our facility is open house every day, right? So when we can grab 15 minutes, when we can have families at practice, when we can, I think it's healthy for the players to see that interaction as well. So, my wife I wouldn't be where I'm at today without her. She's her discipline, her commitment. I mean, it's pretty special to watch. So, and I know the biggest compliment I can give her is just the way that I know our children see her, the light that they see her in, and the respect that they have for her and the love that they have for her. So Allie's pretty special. Certainly there's not a day that goes by that I'm not more and more thankful for all that she does, for sure.
Awesome stuff. And to your kids as well. I know the older I get, the more lessons I take from being a parent that I apply to my day-to-day career and other interactions. What have you learned from being a parent that has made you a better football coach, and maybe vice versa? What have you taken from the coaching world that's helped you as you raise your kids and help to form them into the people they're going to be in the future?
Well, I think reality is, and I have a lot of younger coaches that are having their first child, or they have really young kids. It just changes everything. I think first of all, you realize how selfish you are when you have children, right? I mean, immediately you're like, wow, I used to make all these decisions with just thinking about myself, a different level of responsibility and accountability. But I think that you're a little more understanding of kind of the nature versus nurture, the player, right? Like his background, all the things that come with the person, the student, the football player, and what the organization as a whole should be about, right? We really have an opportunity to kind of make a difference in it's really life-changing impact on the player, and I think that being a parent, you realize the environment has so much to do with who they become, right? So we view our program a little bit that way. The part of our responsibility is to continue what the parents have started, whether that's, two parents, one parent, a mentor, a coach, whoever is handing off that young person to our program. We want to continue to impact that player in every area. So I think for me, that's what having kids for me has done. And when they get to that 6, 7, 8 range and they really start having real conversations with you, and I just think it changes everything about coaching, and you see you see everything in a little bit different light. And certainly for me, my dad was a high school coach. I have two brothers that are high school coaches. It's a little bit of a reminder of why you got into the profession and ultimately the impact that football can have on young people.
Special stuff. Well, Coach, I want to end with a couple of fun ones because I think it helps to get us to know you and the JMU community as well. What's your favorite football movie of all time? Lots of great ones to choose from, but if you had to pick one, because let's just say you got a night off and you're going to watch a movie, but you want to still be connected to football, do you have a go-to top movie of all time in the football world?
Yeah, Rudy's the go-to. I mean, I think I'm a big Hoosiers guy too. I like Hoosiers as well. But that's basketball. But just those two in particular, both my boys have watched those two movies, put it that way.
All right, there you go. If you could pick any coach from history, doesn't even have to be a football coach, but a coach in history that you could have on your staff to help you win a big game, who's that one coach you're picking and why?
Yeah, that's great. I think the basketball, the guys, NBA basketball, college basketball, the impact that one individual can have on the culture of a team, I think is always really, and I'm watching this March Madness.
Yeah.
I think Coach K, to me, what he was able, his story in terms of that whole, the way that Duke program was built, how did it necessarily start the way he wanted it to, and then how he continued to evolve, and then the branch of coaches that he's produced. I mean, you think about all these guys that are out there coaching right now. So Coach K, wouldn't mind have him tag along for the year this year.
Pretty good choice. One of our sponsors, the Dead Meat Society, is all about building a grilling community of enthusiasts. What's your backyard go-to? Again, you get an afternoon off, you're firing up the grill. What's your go-to signature item if you're getting fired up this week?
Yeah, I'm a filet on the grill guy, man. No doubt. I'm a Montreal steak seasoning.
There you go.
I cook a pretty good filet, I have to say.
There you go. There's a fundraising opportunity there, one way or the other, is backyard steaks with Coach Napier. And then my final question, if you weren't coaching football at the college level, I think I know the answer to this would probably be coaching at the high school level. But if football wasn't in the picture for you, what do you think you might be doing if you weren't roaming the sidelines, at least at sub level?
Yeah, that's a great question. I
think you are. So
yeah, sure. I think that ultimately, I'm going to be doing something that's going to be impacting young people, teaching. I think nonprofit charity work. How can I help other people? Where can you find similar purpose? Yeah. I'm a people person. I enjoy being around, being a part of a team, right? Where could I go recreate that and find meaning about what I was doing? Ultimately, that's what I'd be looking for.
Well, Coach Napier, you've given us 58 minutes of your time on the day when you're going to have your first practice. Your commitment, your passion for the program, but also the young men that you're leading is obvious. And on behalf of, I know, everyone here at Sound Off, who try to be as passionate and supportive as we can be of this program, it's appreciated. And just know you have an entire community that's behind everything you do. And if there's anything that we can do on this platform to be of service to the program, the answer is going to be yes. So I'll kind of end with just your final message to the fan base as we enter spring football, and obviously what comes after as we get ready to fire up the 2026 version of JMU football.
Yeah, I mean, I think really for me, I'm just really humbled to be a part of an incredible place. I think each day that goes by, I learn something or I meet another person that makes not only James Madison special, but just Harrisonburg, the Valley as a whole, the makeup of this community, and the number of people that this place has impacted. It's just humbling to be associated and really be in a leadership position. And I'm excited about doing our best here to continue to elevate the program.
Awesome. Well, Coach, good luck seriously with everything. And we wish you and your team health as we go throughout the spring. I know that's a top priority and everything, but we know you've got a lot of long days and long nights ahead of you. But thanks for what you're giving to the community. Thanks for what your staff is doing, and all the best as your families transition up to Harrisonburg. We know there's a lot of firsts that are going to come in the next couple of weeks and months, and it's an exciting time for all.
Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate it, man.
All right, go Dukes, and we'll talk to you soon, Coach Napier. And with that, we're going to bring back the rest of our Sound Off crew. Guys, a really special conversation. I can't think of too many Division I college football coaches that are going to give an hour of their time on the day that they're doing their first practice. I'll just throw it around. Your kind of initial reactions to the discussion, and it's exciting times as the Billy Napier era officially begins today. Michael, go to you first. Or Taylor, yeah.
Michael. The reason I was asking so many questions early on there about, what was his perception? What's the recruit's perception? He talks about all the coaches telling, him that JMU is the place to be. And this might be confirmation bias, but I'm pretty sure everyone from Signetti to Chesney, they have all said something along those lines that when they got hired, that all their coaching buddies were saying, go to JMU. And yet again, here's someone else coming on talking about how this, external perception of those who know the industry and know the college football landscape is that JMU is a place that players and coaches want to be. It's a place where they're going to have success in their careers, and it's a place where you're going to win. And he talks about the winning culture and the community embracing it. And, obviously, some people might say, well, what do you expect him to say, that the fans don't care? No, but I think if you go back and listen to that interview, there's certain things that he's pointing out about the community that are unique and are not just generic kind of football talk. I mean, they're rooted or based in some experience that he's had with this community. And I think when people talk about coming into the JMU community, we're all used to it. I mean, everyone on here of us, we've been doing this for decades. Afton, a little less, but
1.5 decades for Afton.
Again, here's my UTSA plug for the episode. It was when I went to UTSA that I realized that not every college football program is like what you have at JMU, from the community, from the staff, the resources, the investment. He mentioned that when he got here, what he was really shocked about was not just the investments the athletic program had put into it, but just the overall campus feel. And, he said something that I thought was interesting, where he talked about, you have students going to class in person here, which we don't really pick up on at JMU as much as some of these larger public institutions that have 40, 50, 60,000 students. There are a lot of students going to those universities that are not attending in-person classes. So I think what we have at JMU, it continues to be very special. It continues to be unique. And when we continue, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but as we continue to look at this ever-changing college football landscape, who's G6, who's P4, who's kind of not G6, but kind of, JMU has situated itself in a position from both a holistic campus, an academic institution, and an athletic program to where I'd say we're in a much better position than most.
Taylor, I want to piggyback off one thing you just said, because I think it was, to me, the most shocking and surprising thing he said during his interview in a positive way was the fact of his understanding of the full extent of the Harrisonburg community, even as much to be able to reference that it was a refugee resettlement community. Like, that's not something you're going to pick up on a 101 level of JMU. He's done his homework. He really has gotten out. And that level of appreciation for the mine workers, for the mill workers and stuff who are in town, I don't think is something you can fake. It really comes across as genuine. And I think as Matt Rohn and this entire staff and his staff, Coach Napier, has continued to build those bridges and connectivity, I think his style and his tone is going to be well received by the broader Harrisonburg community. And that's going to continue to pay not only dividends in terms of the types of things we all prioritize, like ticket sales and engagement, but just a genuine, I think, appreciation for the type of human being he is. There's just an authenticity I took away from the discussion that was really refreshing. And you can tell he's enjoying being back at this level of football, which is also something I think it's going to serve him well, but the broader program as well. Michael.
I think it's just really cool that he starts practice in a couple of hours and decides to spend almost an hour with us. I think
kind of came on early, by the way.
Yeah, he came on early.
Us all, like half an hour early discussion.
Yeah, like what are the chances? I think it speaks a lot to who he is and the type of ball coach he is as well, right? Obviously, like if you think about all our coaches over the last 10 plus years, everyone had their different personalities and such. And one thing that stood out to me, and we've kind of talked about this in past episodes, but he always talks about alignment. Right. I think he had that alignment in Louisiana between the administration and the athletics program. Obviously he had his couple of years of Florida where, if you look at what Florida's done ever since Urban Meyer, right, I think alignment might be a question there, right? But you look at here in terms of the resourcing that he has, being able to build a staff right away, his emphasis on personnel, right? Like I mentioned earlier, it's not about the X's and O's, it's the Jimmies and the Joes. And him talk about alignment, but then saying, hey, we did an awesome job in the offseason, right, with getting personnel into here. And obviously, once you put some pads on, we'll kind of figure that out, right? See separate the men from the boys a little bit, who can take a hit, who can't, and who could actually move and such like that. But like, I think there's a lot of excitement to have here. And he's someone that appreciates what we have, which is great, coming obviously from the SEC. There's obviously differences in resourcing there, but he understands, like, what do we need to win at this level, right? What do we need to win in this conference? I think that's the most important part. And, you know me, I'm an X's and O's guy, personnel guy. Like, the fact that he's so bullish on the line of scrimmage, right? He's so bullish on how do we win up front? And then Afton, love your question around the quarterback, right? Like, if looking at the schedule, we're playing 12 games or 10 games straight before bye. My thing is run the damn ball, get 5 yards of carry, shorten the game, keep the team healthy and win games, right? Until we can get to that bye. Like, that could be the key to success, right? Win the line of scrimmage up front. So a lot to unpack here, but I know, we've got a month now. We start spring ball. We start seeing sort of how this team looks like. And obviously April 25th, it's an exciting time, but we know there's very little to glean from a spring game, but it'll be exciting to see, like, how tall are these guys? How big are we? Like, is it actually, like, is some of the measurables on paper look the same on the field? And like, what do we look like and such? And I think I'm definitely something I'm looking forward to.
Michael, can you talk a little bit about this? Because I know you know this, talk a little bit about how spring ball is going to be different this year because of the one transfer portal, and how that kind of probably is going to differ from years past to now.
Right. So for the listeners, right, so in years past, we've had 2 portals, one right after the season and one right after spring ball. So spring ball, honestly, is a lot of evaluation. Obviously, everything is about evaluation, but the difference now is you can't miss. Right. We have one portal season where you can enter the portal and sign. And I think we'll be able to sign some folks here, right after spring ball, just to fill in gaps, but we're not going to see a mass exodus or some sort of mass exodus after this. You might see some players that don't make the cut, right? Like, I don't know where we are scholarship wise, but listening to other podcasts with other programs, I think some coaches intentionally over recruit in certain positions and kind of see where the competition takes us. So you might see that, right? Whether it's offensive line, defense line, et cetera. But in terms of like entering the portal, that looks a little bit different. So great question there, Taylor. I think we'll get a sense of this team being able to gel right away, and versus last year or the last couple of years where we've got to sort of rebuild the team going into June and July.
Yeah, and I wanted to pick up on something Michael was talking about earlier, that also something Coach Napier said, where Coach Napier was talking about, I'm coming into a program. A lot of times you're coming into a program and you're having to build back up. And he was talking about how nice it was to come into a program where it's already at the top. And, I've brought this up before, but this is our 4th coaching hire that we're hiring because someone was pulled away. And, I'm going to throw some shade at our friends over across the mountain in Charlottesville. I've seen some of their fans say, oh, JMU's just having another coach is plucked away. I've gone back on UVA's history. I don't think they've had a coach ever plucked away. And I mean, ever. And so I think that the shade that they think they're throwing is more of a compliment to what JMU has done. And Coach Napier even touched on that a little bit about how there's an expectation and there's a program here. He kind of said something about, it doesn't really matter who's in this seat here, that there's a certain way that this program is going to continue to operate. And I think we take for granted, again, this 23, 24, winning seasons, and that we continue to have coaches lured away versus the inverse of having to replace a coach after not meeting expectations.
And let me double down on that, because in the interview, it sounds like he's building a sense of ownership, right? He's building a sense of ownership on what that expectation is, the urgency behind it, what that benchmark is for JMU, not just for the players, but also the coaches. And I think that's super important when you come in here, because, we saw the staff leave, and who is here that right now demonstrates, right, that Duke DNA. We've got Dallas that comes back. Obviously, Cliff made it here still, but a lot of people left. And sometimes it's hard to like keep that JMU sort of feeling and that DNA we had mentioned, right? And I think he's embracing that, which I think is super important. And let's call it what it is. We're going to rely on a lot of the players that have been here before, right? The Chase Regans, the players, the Boogie Mines that Afton you were talking about. Those are the types of guys that will need to carry that culture, truly culture, from multiple staffs to Coach Napier, because they're going to be ones driving the show.
Afton, your kind of thoughts on any part of the conversation you want to take it?
Yeah, I just think listening to him talk just makes me excited for football season, right? Like he talks about every position group, how we're going to dominate the line of scrimmage. He's talking about the quarterback group, how we're going to need players to run the football. Like how Michael was saying, we have 10 or 11 straight games before bye week. It's just getting me all excited, like basketball season's over for us. Like I'm locked and loaded, I'm ready for spring ball. He's getting me excited. And I like how he's not just talking about football. He's talking about how he's a mentor for all the players, just like he's a mentor for his kids, like John asked about, which I think is really cool.
Well, Taylor, I'm glad you mentioned the Furman game because you have your UTSA shout-outs. I like to bring out Midnight Chattanooga whenever I can. That's the most intimidated I've ever been walking into a venue, and I'm including walking into Oregon. Like walking into that stadium at Furman, anytime I hear that, I get a little bit of a shiver down my spine because that was one of the more intense atmospheres. But I did think that was also really cool that he was still connected to that program and had his familiarity with JMU. And again, I just – it comes across as authentic to me, and the proof will be in the pudding as we watch him navigate the next couple of months and into next season. But there's a genuine nature to him and his appreciation for this role, and I think that's the thing that's going to really sell him in recruiting and the ability to connect with young men is his appreciation and his desire to be here, and the way he can have that come across so naturally, I think is the type of thing that is going to allow for that rate, which you mentioned earlier, is the number of visits we had that turned into successful commits being so high. And that's in his first year with the transition that occurred. It's kind of exciting to think now with an off season, and then the more he gets to know this program and the more connected he gets to the community, that number should only continue to increase again, as we continue to work on enhancing and upgrading our revenue share programs and everything else that's going around the program, whether it's facilities or Matt Roan's commitment to building out the entire athletic department. That's going to only continue to arm him with more resources to continue to build this roster and to continue to take us forward. If anybody doesn't have anything, we can continue off our recap of that discussion. But I did want to go around the horn just really quick on the schedule, since we haven't had a chance to talk. If there's any reactions that you all had to the Sun Belt schedule, and there still, I guess, could be some uncertainty around the schedule because of the fact that our newest program to the conference is currently on two schedules. They're on which is insane, and I have a feeling will hopefully get rectified with some dollars and cents going back the other way in the next couple of weeks. But Taylor, maybe I'll go to you. Your reaction to the schedule, anything that stood out? It's a challenging one for sure, and a schedule that, let's be honest, I think a lot of us were looking from a home schedule perspective being I mean, it's not what we had this season. I think we could all be transparent about that, but it's one that's going to challenge us for sure.
It's a brutal schedule in a different way than last year's schedule was a brutal schedule. I think last year we talked a lot about how difficult that schedule was going to be. And I think with last year, a lot of the games that we thought were going to be some of the toughest ended up not being, and vice versa, the other way around. This schedule, I would say to the average college football fan on the national landscape, they would look at this schedule and they probably wouldn't think a lot of it. There's not a P4 team on there. A lot of what we have, those 3 Thursday night games. I look at this schedule and I think there's a lot of obstacles in here that if we're able to, in the first half of the season, to establish ourselves as a solid team, I was going to say the back half is a little, it really, that Liberty game, I won't go on a Liberty rant. You all know how I feel about Liberty, but it's one of those games where it's kind of like records, which won't exist at that point, but records go out the window. They're going to have the chip on their shoulder. They're the Conference USA team, and Conference USA, I think as a conference, probably gets the least respect out of FBS schools. So Liberty's going to feel like they have something to prove. There was last year, after not playing us for 10 years, I think they had a lot of high expectations last year, and then we didn't play a very solid game and still came away with a almost 20-point victory. Then that Wagner game comes in, which I think is going to be good because, week 2, you're still trying to figure out some things. But that West Coast trip to San Diego State, again, we don't know what this San Diego State team is going to look like. We don't really know what any of these teams really are going to look like next year. But that's a coast-to-coast. Yeah, go ahead, John.
I was going to say, I'm just agreeing with you. That I read something it's one of the hottest stadiums in America too. Most people think of San Diego and they think 70-degree temperatures.
The way the stadium is designed, there's not a lot of natural shade, even for the fans. Yeah. And again, like, oh my gosh,
so there were like New York Times.
It does matter. It does matter.
No, there were New York Times articles about. I remember when they first opened that stadium, about how they were having such a problem keeping students at the game because they had massive problem
hospitalizations, dehydration and everything. Yeah, I mean, the conditions are going to be brutal. The West Coast, the time change, the travel, and again, those that follow G6 football recognize that San Diego State is one of the, probably, I'd argue, a top 5 G6 football program, and that this win would probably look better on our resume than the bottom half of P4. But again, is that media cartel that's going to talk down every single team that doesn't have ACC, SEC, Big Ten next to their name. That is yet to be seen. But that we're going to know a lot about this team early on. We have that trip to Old Dominion. We get Marshall at home. Again, I've stopped trying to predict how those programs are going to be, because although the Marshall game needs to get renamed to the home team doesn't win bowl, or the home team doesn't win rivalry, because all 4 years the away team has been the victor. I hope we can break that streak this year. Going to Southern Miss, going to UConn, late in the season.
Does that feel like a main game to everybody? It's going to be. Am I overplaying that? Yeah.
UConn's been a great program. They've the last couple of years since we've played them, but their fan base is still. New England college football fan bases are so hit or miss, and so I don't know what the atmosphere is going to be like. It's going to be late in the season. I'm hoping that you're going to be overly focused on the Sun Belt championship and your Sun Belt conference. So it's kind of like that Washington State game where. It's just
they also have a new coach. They have a new coach. So
I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, because you did bring up UConn, is we have been extended an invitation to the Andersons' house. So Don and Georgia have extended an invitation to all of us to Sound Off to go experience everything that the Northeast has to offer. So shout out to Don and Georgia.
And I'll get to the Coastal Carolina game. I feel bad that I didn't bring this up to Coach Napier, because he was talking about how, a different member of each staff is assigned to be an expert on said team. And I would feel really bad if the person assigned to that team says, man, I really think we can blow these guys out by 30 points. And I'll be like, I just need to let you know that the expectation here at JMU is 40 points minimum when we play Coastal Carolina. It's kind of a tradition. So hopefully we can relay that message to Coach Napier that anything less than 40 points against Coastal Carolina is kind of viewed as a loss in the JMU fans. So.
Well played, sir.
Yeah.
Michael, anything else with you?
Yeah, I was going to say, when I look at the schedule, I just think we've got to move. And I'm sure Coach and the staff knows, it's like, all I think about is urgency. That's it. Because you've got a lot of first, right? And who remembers, Coach Chesney's first home game at Bridgeforth versus Gardner-Webb, and the boos that went on the field after the first half, because at the end of the day, that's a lot of the players' first time in front of 25, 26,000 people. That's the first time that staff was around, that type of environment, right? It's the first time you have staff upstairs versus downstairs in a game environment. So you add that, plus, like Taylor said, it is Liberty, right? They're going to have a chip on their shoulder. They're going to have something to prove. They're going to bring their fans. We all know that. They also are a triple option team. So defensively as well, like we're running, I kind of want to double down that with Coach, but we're running a totally new defensive scheme, right? And what does that look like? So they're going to have to gel very quickly against a Liberty team that they're going to throw a lot of window dressing at you. And obviously, my gut tells me I'd love to get some of the kinks out versus a Wagner versus a Liberty first, but it is what it is. And then it takes a whole day to travel to San Diego. It takes a whole day to come back. And then you're taking a hopefully hungry Old Dominion team that finished last year, with a lot of momentum. Yes, they don't have a quarterback, but they still run that ridiculous scheme where, again, you have to be sound, right? And yes, we could have big, fast, awesome guys that run and, all that stuff. But like, how do we play together? So we just got to have a lot of urgency. And then we've got 3 straight Thursday night games. I think the first one being at Boone after homecoming versus Georgia State, if I'm looking at this. So you've got a short week to then travel down to Boone, which, we've had X and Y success in. Then we got to travel. No, it's a home game versus Troy on a Thursday night, which is great. And then we got to travel to Mississippi, which we've never done before. So another first, right, as an organization. And then obviously we talked about UConn and Coastal. It's kind of a lonely November, right? We have one game in November at Bridgeforth. So like that game versus Coastal could be an amazing atmosphere, right? Depending on where we are and what we're looking forward to. or it could, again, like be a, what type of team do we have right at that point, and what type of record do we show? So Billy's going to earn it, right? Coach and staff will certainly have to earn it this year.
And I forgot where I heard this, but it was the four of us were talking with someone. I can't remember if it was in person on one of our episodes or a text thread or something, but there was some talk about, during the interview process with some of the coaches coming in, it was talk to them like the JMU fan base sees 8-4 as kind of a bad season, and that a lot of coaches kind of were like, oh man, that's tough. But that Coach Napier and his administration was like, as they should. I mean, the expectations here are at a much higher level than you have a lot of programs. And it was almost, if I'm remembering the story correctly, that Coach Napier's response to that was one of the only coaches that was like, the fans are right. We've elevated our program to a point where, if everyone remembers the 8-4 finish for Coach Chesney, obviously we ended on a high note with the bowl, and we had the 70-point, output against UNC, but there were a ton of fans that were saying, I don't know if this Chesney guy has it. He has too small of a resume. And then 1 year later, he's off to UCLA. So I don't think it's bad for JMU fans to have high expectations. As a matter of fact, I would also go as far to say they shouldn't have anything but high expectations. But there is a caveat there that the expectations at JMU are, I mean, statistically in an help me out, guys. Abnormal. There we go. That's it.
Abnormality.
Man, I'm from Botetourt, man. Right. I don't know words that are bigger than 10 letters. But yeah, it's just I like hearing that story that Coach Napier understands what the expectations are. And this coming full circle back to his interview, he knows the Valley. He wants to be here. He even talked about, there was a time where he was like, do I want to continue to be a head coach somewhere? And if I do, coming to a place because he wants to be here, wanting to be a part of the Valley, the part of the community. And it just gets me excited to see where this team is really embracing. We are JMU. We are the Valley's team, and we are the best program in Virginia right now.
Yeah, just great stuff. And I want to say from us with spring practice, I know, Michael, you usually get a chance to make your way up to some practice. I know Afton, you do as well. I'm going to do everything that I can to try to get up experiences, but getting to the spring game this year, I think is something that I don't know. I was excited in the past to go to these games. I feel like for me personally, I'm not only excited just to see what makes this group different than previous ones, but I feel like this staff, because of where they're coming from and how their last stop ended, just have something to prove. And that to me has come through in every offline conversation, every online conversation that I've had. And I'm excited to see what that looks like in person. I'm also excited to see what a practice looks like for Billy Napier compared to what we saw from our last staff, because I think it was well documented how different of an approach Coach Chesney had to compete periods. But something that I've now heard Coach Napier mention on multiple interviews is that he plans to take some of those lessons and some of the things he saw from Coach Chesney and apply it to how he runs a practice too, and leaning in on those returning players to help drive what this program looks like, what this system looks like. So a lot of storylines, a lot of things for podcasts like us to cover, and excited to bring that. I wanted to ask you guys, if there's anything on any of the other sports going through the spring. Obviously, we want to give our kudos to the JMU women's basketball team that wrapped up their season yesterday in West Virginia against Kentucky, and former head coach Kenny Brooks. Anything you guys want to mention on that? I know we were all dialed in watching it, but another great season for that program. And yes, it's weird again to see Kenny Brooks on the other sideline. He had a great embrace, obviously, with Coach O'Regan, but exciting stuff.
Coach O'Regan, he was 1-0 against his former head coach when we beat Virginia Tech in 2019 in the WNIT. So this was Kenny's revenge game that he had to get back. And I think one cool thing that I saw for those that watched the first quarter, it wasn't just that Kentucky was the better team. We did not play well. I mean, we went down to 32-10 at the end of the first quarter. We did not bring our A game. But, we ended up only losing by 15. And what I think that says a lot about Coach O'Regan and his teams and the women's basketball team out there representing JMU was that they weren't out there just to kind of throw in the towel. And there was a lot of pride in the name on the front of the jersey, Coach O'Regan letting this team and showing the nation that this was not a team that was going to give up just because being down by so much after the first quarter. And, watching Peyton McDaniels come off the floor, that was tough, because it's when you have those kind of athletes come through JMU and, it's the last time they're going to take the floor in a JMU uniform, but it wasn't the way we wanted it to end. But I think there was a lot. I was very proud at how they ended that game, given how the first quarter started. And again, they brought us yet another Sun Belt championship. And I think I saw this. I want to say it was either Kurt Dudley or Shane Metland that tweeted out that Sean O'Regan actually reached, in his first 10 years under the helm of JMU, more wins than Coach Brooks did. So that's not to put anything against Coach Brooks, but just to show that we are very lucky to have two incredible head coaches at the helm of that program.
I just think it's really impressive what they did this year. I think it was more of a revenge year than anything after coming off 2 straight overtime Sun Belt championship losses when you're the favorite. But I mean, the first quarter obviously didn't go great, but I think Taylor made a good point. We didn't throw in the white towel. I mean, we won the last 3 quarters combined against Kentucky, right? That's really impressive. First quarter killed us, but it was impressive to see us fight back. And like Taylor said, Peyton McDaniel, her last game, it's hard to see her go off the court. If you haven't watched her post-game interview, you should. It's pretty good. It shows basically just how she thinks of JMU and how JMU should think of her, right? And I think it's impressive. I think it was a great season. I think more to look forward to. It's a really young team, other than 2 best players are graduating, but then everybody else, freshmen, sophomore, juniors, a lot of freshmen on this team. You have 3 starters returning, barring no transfers here. So I think it's an impressive game, impressive run for the team. 12 seed as well. That's also impressive. I wish the first quarter would have gone better, because I think the game honestly would have been a really good game, right? I mean, we lost by 15 points, and I think it was honestly a nice way to end the season. It's pretty cool. We ended the season on a buzzer beater, right? So I think it's pretty cool. Made your last shot. Always a good way to end the season. Basketball players never leave on a miss. We didn't leave on a miss, so.
Nothing about other sports, but let's just go back to the football piece, because obviously we've got spring ball starting literally in a couple hours, and we've got the spring game coming up. Afton, love that you asked Coach Napier about the quarterback position, because right now I think that's the hot topic, right? We got Arrington Maiden, we've got oh my gosh, the guy from UCF that came from Tech. What's his name? Davi
Belfort.
Davi Belfort. Yeah, and then we've got JC Evans, all these guys. I mean, it's going to be an incredible battle, and I think, John, to your point, how does his staff, practice versus Coach Chesney, which was very much a lot of divvied out snaps and such? Do we just lean in on the top 2 strings or whatnot, right? Kind of similar to Coach Sig in years past. Who knows? But that's going to be exciting to see. And then also, too, like I mentioned on the interview, brought in a lot of wide receivers. And you look at coming out of this year where, we had Landon Ellis and we brought in a lot of wide receiver talent where, give or take, I think they lived up to it, but they've also had, some games where you left a lot to be desired. I'm just really curious how they look and how explosive they look, et cetera. It's exciting one. It's very much we have a lot of question marks, obviously. Anytime you win, UCLA is now being told about as JMU West, right? True JMU West being all the way out there just with some of their players, but who steps in and who looks at this as an opportunity versus challenge will be one to see.
You're muted, John.
Sorry. I was going to say, and if you look at this quarterback battle, the quarterback with the only one with starting experience is Camden Coleman. So what role does he have in this race, and how does that play into this? But I mean, there's definitely a case you can be made, as I thought Afton did a great job after Coach Napier was hired and we started to bring in players, of putting together the resume of each one of these quarterbacks. And you can make a case for all of them and their backgrounds and the talents and skill sets that they have. But there isn't a lot of starting experience outside of Camden Coleman, and Camden Coleman's was at the FCS level, and there's a year removed. So I don't think it's a stretch to say this will be one of, at least in the G5 world, is one of the most intently focused on and talked about quarterback battles in the country.
Well, and, going back to JMU fans' expectations, going all the way back to the Vad Lee years, ever since then, we've had either the player of the year or the person that was in running for player of the year from the quarterback position. I'd almost, also the majority of the quarterbacks that have come through since then, almost all of them have gotten an invite to an NFL camp, at some point. And so there's a lot of high expectations that we have at the quarterback position. And despite not having a lot of starts from the quarterback room in this era of NIL and transfer, I mean, I haven't looked at the other teams. We've got to have one of the deeper rooms in terms of guys that were projected to be starters when they were recruited to their prospective teams.
Yeah, Davi Belfort was a 4-star top ESPN quarterback coming out of high school. Obviously, you're coming out of high school, but you're talking about people, as you mentioned, that have the skills, right? They have, what you need to be a great quarterback, right? Whether it's JC Evans' size and arm strength, or Camden Coleman, and he brings a bit of size to his position too, and starting experience. You have Arrington Maiden, who looks like a prototypical JMU quarterback, and then you bring in some of the legs, athleticism from Belfort's standpoint. But you just look all the way around, right? And I think I want to remind our listeners, every program in the country, besides maybe one or two, is going through that same transition period as we speak, right? They're asking the same questions. We mentioned Old Dominion having to play in Norfolk. Who's going to be their quarterback? I think I forgot where their quarterback went to. Wisconsin, I believe. He's at Wisconsin now. So they're trying to figure out who's going to be running that sort of spread offense. Troy's going to be doing the same thing, right? Southern Miss, we're going down to Hastings. Charlie Huff, one and done. Who's going to, I don't know if they even have a team, right? Like half that team, I don't know if they went to Memphis or not, but that's going to be, a lot of them went to Memphis, right? Yeah. Every program, particularly in the Sun Belt, is going to be going to the same transition, right? We saw App State last year do it with their first-year coach. Coastal will be doing it this year, right, after they fired their coach. I'm trying to think who else. Georgia Southern, they retained their coach, but you just never know what you're going to get. And we're going to
quarterback.
Pittsburgh. Yeah. But at the same time, right, it's like we've got, like I always say, I don't want to sound boring, but we got to be able to win up front. If we can get 4 to 5 yards a carry, shorten the game, let our defense be healthy as a whole, right, and be productive, I think we've got a good shot to make a really good run because, can we just be better, right? I think that's kind of been the JMU way over the last 5 years since being FBS. We've had the personnel to do it. Now, as we think about it, this is going to be the first true FBS program when you really think of how the players were recruited, compared to years past.
I think a lot of people talk about the quarterbacks, and it makes sense, right? A lot of people talk about the receivers because of the size, or linemen because of the size. But I think one of the position groups that's kind of being overlooked is the running backs, because we're bringing George Pettaway back. So a lot of people are just like, well, George Pettaway's back. That's our running back, right? And he most likely will be the starter, you would assume, right? But you can't just have one running back, as we saw last year. If we only had Wayne Knight would be not as successful as Wayne Knight was, right? So I think a big piece in this is the transfer from Drake, Nick Herman. I like his film a lot from Drake. He's really fast. He's a true freshman, 1,000-yard rusher in the FCS. I think that's really impressive. But I think that's just a little bit of an overlooked position right now because of one of our, honestly, rare returning players for this year right now. And it was one of our best returning players, if not the best. So I think that position group's a little bit overlooked. But I think Nick Herman is going to make a big impact this year and can help George Pettaway out by giving him some carries.
Awesome stuff. And again, we're going to be checking in as we go throughout spring. I did want to wrap up one last thing and give a shout out to the JMU Duke Club for picking some new spots to do the spring tour. Taylor, I feel like I'd be remiss. I know we're at an hour and a half. You've been banging the drum about Southwest Virginia, but also now getting a spot in North Carolina, giving a growing alumni group down there an opportunity to showcase their passion for the program. I think this matters maybe more than many of the other storylines are getting touched on, because we're continuing to find new ways to give other groups of the fan base a chance to get fired up, get excited. I know when you have one of these spring tour events, it matters in the numbers, and maybe your experience being a part of planning this, I think it's a big deal, and I want to give them credit for it, because I think it's going to pay dividends, and hopefully this is a trend that continues, is giving more fans an opportunity to ask tough questions as a part of the spring tour, but also to get the excitement that comes from it.
Yeah, I thought it was actually kind of neat. Last week on ESPN, there was that. Did everyone see that picture that was shared? It was one of the Duke Club Coaches Caravan events, and it was Coach Signetti and Coach Byington sitting side by side. So, this is an opportunity, like John and Michael and Afton were mentioning earlier. We're very fortunate to have a Division I coach of an FBS program that's about to start their spring practice dedicate an hour of their time to this podcast. I think it's also really special that we have these coaches that are willing to go out and meet the fans where they are. Jim Pomeroy, I'm going to give him another shout out, the president of the Roanoke alumni chapter down here. He's been doing a lot of work to get folks together. There's been multiple events where we've had 50, 60 plus people just for a happy hour. And I think the opportunity to see some of the new faces, to meet the coaches, we're going to put on a good show down here. And I also spoke to some folks down in Charlotte last week that were excited about the coaches coming down there. So it's a unique opportunity. And it's probably the only time that you're going to have some one-on-one conversations with, again, which are some very meaningful names in the college athletic landscape.
I'll tell you, we got to do some planning. So whether there's a live something in Roanoke, Afton, I know you and I will be at the one in Richmond. We got to do some coordinating behind the scenes to make sure we can get some coverage of those events. But guys, this is an episode I think over time we're going to pinch ourselves for. That was pretty special. And again, I think a lot of news came out of this, but also just a lot of insight into who he is as a person. I know I'm fired up after getting to hear a little bit more about who he is. And I know over the coming weeks, we're going to be trying to also bring you some of the assistant coaches to get a little insight into them, as well as some of the behind the scenes figures who were an important part of letting JMU athletics shine. Some of those being the athletic trainers. I know we're excited for some discussions with them as well. And then we'll get deeper and deeper into the offseason as we get ready for what will be here. It's crazy when you make this turn past spring break. Game one is here before we know it, and preseason football and everything that comes with it. It's crazy how fast the offseason goes these days as we all see how fast time moves. But gentlemen, as always, appreciate the discussion. To our fans, thanks again for checking in with us. I want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Skyline Financial Partners, as well as Champions Drive, Where's Woody, Purple Nation, Shoker Enterprises, the Dead Meat Society, Outdoor Kitchen Creations, and Valley Road Vineyards. And with that, that's another episode of JMU Sound Off in the books. Thank you to JMU Athletics Communications, as well as the JMU football staff for the access today. And we look forward to more conversations in the future. And with that, go Dukes, and we'll talk to you guys soon.